Hollywood can be fake, fickle, and even deadly. For Marilyn Monroe, she learned this the hard way. Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her home on August 5th, 1962. It was ruled a probable suicide by authorities. The star had a history of mental illness and substance abuse. However, conspiracy theories about her death have swirled ever since, some more plausible than others. But who wanted her murdered? Was it the CIA, the Mafia, or the Kennedys? We also talk about the paranormal aftermath. You see, Marilyn Monroe was a true LA girl at heart, but is she one in the afterlife? Many have claimed to have seen and felt her in and around the Hotel Roosevelt and the old Cal Neva Hotel and Casino. What about her Brentwood home, where she spent her last moments of her life? We talk about this and much more on episode 12, part 2 of the True Crime and Paranormal Aftermath of Marilyn Monroe, Hollywood's true lady of sorrow.
Are you fascinated by mysterious legends, the paranormal, or UFOs?
Do stories of murder, missing persons, and con men send you down internet rabbit holes?
Did you grow up watching the TV show Unsolved Mysteries?
Does Robert Stack's voice haunt your nightmares?
Then our podcast is for you.
I'm Liz.
And I'm Samantha.
Join us every Wednesday as we discuss the original Robert Stack episodes of Unsolved Mysteries.
Follow along with us on Amazon Prime or just tune in for our weekly podcast.
We are on iTunes, Google Play, and social media at Perhaps It's You.
Hey guys, we missed you. I hope you missed us.
Please love us.
Please love us. Please. Welcome back to Hollywood Paranormal. If you definitely caught our first part of Marilyn Monroe, our two-part series, the True Crime Paranormal Aftermath of Marilyn Monroe, Hollywood's Lady of Sorrow. I know if you're just tuning in, please stop this episode and please listen to the first one.
Yeah.
And if you've listened to the first one and now you're tuning into our second part, welcome back. We missed you. All right, guys. So you heard it in the beginning right there. We're going to be talking about her death, the moments leading up to her death, the theories surrounding her death, which are pretty interesting. And of course, the moment you all have been waiting for. Ghosts. Marilyn ghosts.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
Sexy ghost.
Boobs. I mean, boo. Yes. So we're going to be talking about the paranormal aftermath of this beautiful actress. She still lingers in and around Hollywood, driving in her pink Chevy. Apparently, people have seen this pink Chevrolet around town and the blonde. I'm like, no, I think that's Evangeline.
Oh, yes. Can we please do an episode about Evangeline, even though there's no paranormal aspect whatsoever?
When I lived in West Hollywood, I would run into that girl. From behind, she looks like she's 20. In the front, I'm like, whoa, a little too much plastic surgery. So in the 80s, this woman was like a big figure in and around Hollywood. She was just like this blonde Barbie that would travel around Hollywood.
She's just famous for, I use famous in air quotes, but she literally, if any of you who don't live in LA don't know what we're talking about.
Sorry.
Because you wouldn't, there's no way. She's literally so well known in Hollywood for being in Hollywood and nothing else.
And for driving a hot pink Corvette, which she still drives. It's updated now to this very day.
I know. And she bought a billboard near our school, and I was aghast. I literally stared at it and was like, is this real life? Like, what is happening right now?
I love how she would always double park.
Oh, my God.
At the pavilions. Always double park.
Yep. Bless her.
Bless her. And I think she even wrote a book about her life. Oh, Lord. Yes. God bless. We're going to be talking about Marilyn's death and the events leading up to her death and everything. And what I find so interesting about her death is just not about her, but it's just, man, how would I put this? Blondes really don't have fun. Blondes really don't seem to have a lot of fun. They seem to get killed off in Hollywood. Like, you have Marilyn Monroe. You have Sharon Tate. Mae West lived her life. You also had, who else? Thelma Todd. Thelma Todd is another one who was also killed off. She was another blonde bombshell that was killed off too.
Well, and it's like, how far do you want to take that? Because you look at Nicole Brown Simpson. Like,
yes,
I mean,
there you go.
I'm gonna start listing names because there is a type.
Yeah, there is a type. Jean Harlow, that's another one. Carol Lombard. I said James Mansfield. James Mansfield was another one that, or she wasn't killed. It wasn't intentional. It was an accident, but others claim that the occult had something to do with it because she kind of played around with that, especially with a particular leader here in Hollywood who was a big occult leader. And I'm thinking about doing that in our second season about Jane Mansfield because that's another crazy one.
We already talked about the Manson family.
Oh my God, yeah.
And again, there is a type.
Go brunette.
I honestly like it when women go from blonde to brunette. I think it's amazing.
Lived her life.
She did it. Yeah.
Angelina Jolie, she still made it. You know, she's still rocking it.
Brunettes have fun too.
They have fun. Nowadays they get more roles.
Sure.
It's serious to this day that brunettes are getting more roles than blondes. Because I remember a lot of the students that would come into the school would be blonde, and then all of a sudden they turn into a brunette because they're getting more parts. Now, the reason why that is a cause is because it's easier to light brunettes than it is to light blondes, apparently, on film. Yeah, very interesting. So, okay, we're bantering.
I blame everyone's obsession with manic pixie dream girls, but lighting too. That's hilarious.
We'll just blame lighting. That's just what it is. That's what we're going to pretty much just leave it out to. Bless, indeed. All right, guys. So we're going to talk about Marilyn's death. Now, she had just gotten done with the Misfits. She just had a divorce from Arthur Miller and a miscarriage prior to that. And she was involved with the Kennedy brothers. Now, according to the night or the morning of her death, Marilyn Monroe was found dead on August 5th, 1962 at her 12305 5th Helena Drive home, which is in Brentwood, in Los Angeles, of barbiturate overdose. Marilyn Monroe spent her last day, Saturday, August 4th, at her home in Brentwood, accompanied by her publicist, Patricia Newcomb, housekeeper Eunice Murray, photographer Lawrence Schiller, and psychiatrist Dr. Ralph Greenson. I'm grinding my teeth every time I just say his name because I freaking cannot stand him. At various times. Now, at Greenson's request, Murray stayed overnight to keep Monroe company. At approximately 3 a.m. the next day, she noticed that Monroe had locked herself in her bedroom and was unresponsive. Murray alerted Greenson, who arrived soon after and broke into the room from the outside, finding Monroe deceased. Her death was officially ruled as a probable suicide. What am I doing now, Bryce?
There's so many air quotes flying around.
And you do the eye roll. By the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office, based on precedents of her overdosing and being prone to mood swings and suicidal ideation. Now, no evidence of crime was found, and accidental overdose was ruled out due to the large amount of barbiturates she had ingested. Her funeral was held on August 8th at the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery, where she was interred at the Corridor of Memories. Joe DiMaggio took care of all the funeral arrangements.
Which is kind of sweet.
Yeah, which was really sweet. He really did love her, and and her
they actually were weirdly on good terms when she died.
They were friends.
They had become friends.
They did, and he kind of plays a role into, you know, the reports of him being, or I think it was him or his son that was on the phone with her before, she passed. Now, after listening and reading, what happened on that night and the day before that night, the CNC Music Factory once quoted in the song, "Things that make you go, because it just looks very, very clean cut. Like, this whole report looks too clean cut. But there was a lot of holes in this case, per se. So most historians agree Marilyn Monroe endured a terrible ordeal. Now, this is just leading up before her death.
Right.
During her stay, just days before her death, at the Cal Neva in Lake Tahoe, which was owned by Frank Sinatra and was the Rat Pack hangout. If you would have heard in the first part, this is where she, may have hooked up with JFK because there were tunnels underneath. Guess who was hanging out there too? Peter Lawford. Peter Lawford, who is, the brother-in-law to JFK, who's married to his sister Pat, was there. Many witnesses stated that she had a terrible meltdown and was escorted back to her cabin, which was cabin number 3. Now, as she was being escorted back to her cabin, she was molested by 2 mobsters, Skinny D'Amato and Johnny Rosselli. Now, she had stayed here for only 2 days, and she decided to leave abruptly, and she had overdosed that day as well. So there were also claims that she had overdosed at the Cal Neva.
Well, and if you remember from our episode about the casting curse, which I know we keep referencing, but we really love the sound of our own voices.
Yes.
She was on barbiturates. She was taking a lot of pills to go to sleep, and then to counteract them, she had to take a lot of pills to wake up. It's why she was late to set. It's why she was put in rehab semi-forcibly before the filming could continue. So she's on a lot of medication right now.
That she was drinking down with a lot of champagne.
So there's a lot happening right
she
now.
was mixing a lot. Yeah, she, at this point, was at her breaking point. She had just gotten divorced. She had experienced a miscarriage, and now she had just been, either raped or molested by 2 gangsters. I mean, she's already at her boiling point. So she, from what reports had stated, that she had overdosed at the hotel. And there were even some wild claims that she overdosed and died there, and that they transported her body back to her house. And this was all on the orders of Peter Lawford, because he was there.
So this is like, let's call it theory number 1.
Theory number
Because there's so many.
Because Peter Lawford would have wanted this whole arrangement to happen because Marilyn Monroe was after and very thirsty for the Kennedy brothers, but JFK in particular. She had an affair with, John F. Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy as well. And she was willing and ready to make their affair known to the public, along with other secrets that were shared during their pillow talk. So that couldn't happen. And the Kennedy brothers had a little powwow with Lawford, and this could have been another theory. This was just one possible theory. The reason why this was a bit probable is because, like I said in the first part, the tunnels, there were tunnels underneath the hotel that were built in the 1920s, and the only thing that survived in 1937. And of course, Frank Sinatra comes in and, restores it because the building also suffered a fire. So the tunnels were used to run liquor up and down from the lake and hide comings and goings of gangsters, celebrities, and politicians. So they were thinking, well, maybe her body was transported underneath one of those tunnels. Maybe, she was going back and forth trying to find the Kennedys, and so on and so forth. But Monroe spent her last day alive, Saturday, August 5th, at her Brentwood home. Now, this is also clarified in other statements, which I feel is a little more legit. In the morning, she met with photographer Lawrence Scheller, so she also had other individuals involved, to discuss the possibility of Playboy publishing nude photos taken of her on the set of Something's Gotta Give. She also received a massage from her personal massage therapist, talked with friends on the phone, and signed for deliveries. So there's also those documentations too. There's signatures of deliveries that she accepted that day. So it just goes to prove that she was alive the day before. Present at the house in the morning were also her housekeeper Eunice Murray and her publicist Patricia Newcomb, who also stayed overnight. According to Newcomb, they had an argument because Monroe had not slept well the night before. Now, at 4:30 p.m., Dr. Ralph Greenson arrived at the house to conduct a therapy session with Monroe and asked Newcomb to leave. Before he left at around 7 p.m., he asked the housekeeper to stay overnight and keep Monroe company. At approximately 7 to 7:15, Monroe received a call from Joe DiMaggio Jr., with whom she had stayed close since her marriage to his father. He told her that he had broken up with a girlfriend she did not like and detected nothing alarming in her behavior. So she telephones Greenson to tell him about the news about DiMaggio's parting from his girlfriend around 7:40 to 7:45. Now, Monroe retires to her bedroom at approximately 8 p.m. She received a call from actor Peter Lawford, who was hoping to persuade her to attend his party that night. Lawford became alarmed as Monroe sounded like she was under the influence of drugs and told him to say goodbye to Pat, say goodbye to the president, and say goodbye to yourself because you're a nice guy, before drifting off. Unable to reach Monroe, Lawford called his agent, Milton Ibbins, who unsuccessfully tried to reach Dr. Greenson and later called Monroe's lawyer, Milton A. Mickey Rudin. Rudin called Monroe's house and was assured by her housekeeper that she was fine. According to LAPD reports, approximately 3 a.m., the housekeeper woke up, and I say this with flying finger quotes, sensing that something was wrong, and saw light from under Monroe's bedroom door, but was not able to get a response and found the door locked. She telephoned Greenson, whose advice she looked in through a window and saw Monroe lying face down on her bed, covered by a sheet and clutching a telephone receiver. Now, Greenson arrived shortly after. He entered the room by breaking a window and found Monroe dead. He called her physician, Dr. Hyman Egelberg, who arrived at the house at around 3:50 a.m. and officially confirmed the death. At 4:25 a.m., they notified the LAPD. Things that make you go, So Monroe's autopsy was conducted on the morning of Sunday, August 5th by Deputy Coroner Dr. Thomas Noguchi. The Los Angeles County's Coroner's Office was assisted in the inquest by psychiatrist Dr. Norman Farborough, Dr. Robert Littman, and Dr. Norman Tabachinik. These interesting last names, from the Los Angeles Suicide Prevention Center, who interviewed Monroe's doctors and psychiatrists on her mental state. Based on her advanced state of rigor mortis at the time she was found, it was estimated that she had died between 8:30 and 10:30 p.m. The toxicology analysis concluded that the cause of death was acute barbiturate poisoning, as she had 8% milligrams of chloral hydrate and 4.5 milligrams of pentobarbiturate or Nembutal in her blood, and a further 13% milligram of pentobarbital in her liver. Empty bottles of these medicines were found next to her bed by the police. There were no signs of external violence on the body. The findings of inquest were published on August 17th, with Chief Coroner Theodore Kopfrey classifying Monroe's death as a probable suicide, with finger quotes. The possibility of an accidental overdose was ruled out, as the dosages found in her body were several times over the lethal limit and had been taken in one gulp or in few gulps over a minute or so. Which... All right, we can start talking.
Great. Okay, tag me in, Coach.
I can
tag
you in.
The things. That is the official story.
Exactly.
Of how she died. And it is riddled with inaccuracies. And with
many holes.
So many. First, like, where do I even start?
Where do we begin?
I'm, like, getting real, like, ramped up because it's so crazy.
Let's start with the housekeeper.
That's a good place.
Let's start with Eunice.
Oh, Eunice, whom in interviews is just so frustrating. You just want to shake her. The first in sort of problem I have is that the housekeeper supposedly finds Monroe's body and then waits almost 4 hours to call the police. And her excuse when she was questioned about that was that she had called essentially the psychiatrist and the publicity aspect to decide what should be done.
Oh, yeah.
So the fact that her first instinct isn't to call 911 is incredibly questionable to me.
For sure.
That's not what you do. Like, that's shady.
As fuck.
And so I was watching this documentary.
Of course.
And one of the things was that Monroe had allegedly told the housekeeper that she was going to be fired. That, like, she didn't need her to stay on anymore.
Oh, shit, I didn't know that.
So, again, that's probably a little speculative. Right, that's a conversation between two women.
Yes.
But the housekeeper did release a book, or like release, and then had like interviews and all of these things. Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna bring her up later. I don't want to like give away the whole cake right now, but I know I couldn't think of the phrase.
Ooh, cake sampling.
Ooh. But that's my first problem: is that you find a body.
Yeah.
You wait hours to call the police, and when the police get there, they find the housekeeper doing laundry. I
sorry. I saw that because Sergeant Clemens is the first one to be called, and he is like, "The fuck, you're doing laundry?"
Uh-huh.
She's like, "Yeah, washing sheets."
Yeah,
like nothing happened. He's like, "Your boss is in this room dead."
So apparently, and that's the thing. It's obviously, so when he's called, he initially thinks that it is like a prank of sorts, because like the way that it was called was like, oh, Marilyn Monroe is dead, and he's like, okay, well, this, like, no one would say it like that, like,
right?
It's so aggrandized, like, it's so silly. So he gets to the house, and she's there doing laundry, which, if it's any kind of death, if I need to say this, don't touch anything. Don't move the body. Don't move the sheets. Don't do the laundry. Like, why that? It's just so shady.
It's just so many holes. Mm-hmm. But yes, he's on the scene. But he also notices, too, the body looks like it's been repositioned. Mm-hmm. And there is an issue, too, at hand with the glass. Now, Dr. Shady Fuck, as I like to call him, Greenson, he had to break into her room. Now, apparently, there was glass inside.
Right.
When it was no glass outside.
Right.
So that is something that he noticed. He's like, well, if you're outside breaking in, how come there's no glass outside? There's glass in the inside.
Right.
And then he notices, too, well, I see all the barbiturates laid out, neatly screwed.
Yes, so this is let's jump into the second massive hole. Is the scene in general is off.
Yeah.
Most of the time, people who commit suicide are, I hesitate to say dressed for the occasion, but that kind of is the sentiment of, like, if not dressing up for it, really meeting the moment, let's say.
Yeah.
So the fact that they find her naked is right away incredibly unique. That is not the normal situation for a suicide, which is very morbid and sad. Secondly, the fact that there is no chaos. The bottles are all screwed back on. They're lined up, like you were saying. It's a very neat, almost, dare I say, medical setup of the pills. Also, the type of drug that she's taking, she would not have been able to physically swallow that many pills without the aid of water. There's no glass anywhere in the room.
You know, champagne, because she was known to do that too.
Any
nothing,
liquid.
Nothing.
Liquid. So again, what does that mean? Does the housekeeper clean up the scene? Is she the one arranging the bottles? Putting them on? Again, don't touch anything.
I wouldn't be surprised if Eunice did that.
I mean, bless her.
Oh, okay, let me fix these bottles.
So again, and the type of drugs that they are, she would have passed out before she would have been able, she could have killed herself. That's not the problem.
Right.
But the level that they find in her toxicology report, you physically could not swallow pills fast enough to hit those levels.
Especially the amount of pills that she had, too.
Yes. I mean, it is essentially a miracle feat. She's either swallowed the most amount of pills in, like, the history, or she didn't die from the pills. Right? That's the other problem. So there's all these things about the actual crime scene. Like, let's just call this hole number 2.
Yes.
Because it just does not make sense.
In the crime scene, there's no note. The pill bottles are nicely screwed. The caps on top, they're all tightly screwed too. Another thing that Clemens noticed too was, like, her body being repositioned as if it was staged. He he also notices too, the glass inside. It looked like it was staged, like make it look like someone broke in and killed her. Also, another thing that struck him kind of odd was her room. It looked like a room of a drug addict. It didn't look like a room of someone who was, depressed. And of course, like all it was her bed, a dresser, several bags on the floor. There was no decorations, no like frames, no pictures, no nothing, no memorabilia. It was all just bare. So that he found kind of odd as well. Like it just looked too staged. And then we go into the autopsy too. There was...
Ooh, yes.
There were also no sign of poison in her system or her stomach lining. Coroner...
Hole number 3. Number
3. Coroner Dr. Miner, who helped perform the autopsy, stated that she may have been given an enema. Some theories have stated that Marilyn had taken sleeping pills, enough to knock her out cold, since she has been having problems sleeping, and Eunice was then given orders to administer the enema per guess who? Guess whose request? At Greenson. Greenson, who was also claimed to be given that request possibly by Lawford.
Right. And so now the problem with the toxicology report, and why I think it's the most important hole.
It's a big hole.
Yeah. Is that it just can't add up.
No.
And I said this to you right before we started. Anytime there's any kind of discrepancy with the coroner's activity, the coroner's report, the toxicology reports, I automatically assume foul play because there are so many structures in place for that position specifically. There are very specific rules to what you do to get a toxicology report, what you are and are not allowed to do with the body as a coroner.
Right.
And in order to sign the death certificate, you have to have all of the... What I'm trying to say is anything that you claim as a cause of death, you have to have the paperwork to back that up. You can't just be like, oh, it's a suicide by pills and just pull that out of nowhere. You have to have the toxicology numbers that match that. You have to be able to document where you're coming up with the cause of death. And none of that adds up.
No.
The numbers don't add up. The drugs in her system don't add up. It's all, and yet there's still 2 copies of the death report, which is not allowed. You're supposed to have one and only one. So the fact that there's 2 is wrong. And on top of that, there's nothing backing it up. It's just being signed off with no evidence to back it up. It's not the way it's normally done.
Yeah.
Huge hole.
It reminds me of George Reeves.
Yes.
That whole case. It just kind of like parallels in a way why the friends downstairs took a while to call the police. The angle of the bullet entry in the wall, it just all didn't make sense. And the unique, coroner's report. It just, all these holes, once again, we come across these holes. So this also leads us to possible suspects.
Yes.
If she was murdered, let's look at the suspects. So we start with freaking Dr. Greenson. Fact, Dr. Greenson and Anna Freud admitted in letters to each other that they were abusing patient transferences to obtain money from patients to fund the Anna Freud Center. This represents a huge motive to murder, to the murder of Marilyn. Where did Marilyn's estate go after her death? Right to Anna Freud through Dr. Marianne Chris. So Dr. Chris was also working with Anna Freud to fund the Anna Freud Center, acting as Anna Freud's money man in Los Angeles. Dr. Ralph Greenson also became the president of the California chapter of the Anna Freud Center. So this was, there's also rumors that him and Marilyn had an affair during this whole session of her psychoanalysis. And both Dr. Ralph Greenson and Dr. Margaret Hohenberg were cocooning Marilyn in the days and months leading up to her death. So there are details in a book called Marilyn Monroe Unveiled, A Happy Family History, where Dr. Greenson was at Marilyn's house the very day she died. And, of course, continuing to be there after, to the point where he charged the estate for Saturday, August 4th and 5th of 1962, What a total douche. Money hungry. So right there, people believe that Dr. Greenson had something to do with her death because of either Peter Lawford and the Kennedys. And there's also a lot of money involved. So right there, there's the estate, there's the money. He's like, well, if I help them kill her, then I could probably, you know, grab a lot of this money and go to town with it.
And there's a lot of allegations swirling around him.
Yeah.
One of the first responders on the scene has claimed that he was seen injecting Marilyn with a syringe.
That's another thing.
To the chest.
Yes.
And that he, again, the first responder says what was in the tube is not what adrenaline looks like. Because that's what you do. You pump them with adrenaline in the hopes of resuscitating them.
Right.
And that the color, the brownish, syrupy color in the tube doesn't match what adrenaline looks like.
Yes.
But the doctor said, like, everyone out, I'm her doctor, injects her with this syringe, and then he's actually the one that proclaims her dead at the scene. Not normal. That is not normal. That is not protocol.
There was also a rumor that she was still alive.
Yes.
Before he arrived.
Yes.
And then she died right after he administered the, adrenaline.
Quote, unquote.
Unquote. And there was also a report that as he was administering the adrenaline into her chest, that he broke a couple of her rib bones.
Oh.
Yeah, it was really bad. Like, people standing around were, like, confused. They didn't know what to do. They're like, well, he's a doctor. He tried to save her, and now she's dead.
Yeah, it's just like the final... It's such a horrific kind of death of just like these men deciding this woman's life, essentially.
Yeah.
Who her life is marked by men deciding things for her. It really is like a horrifyingly appropriate end for the way that she was treated. And it's just so sad. I mean, the fact that he was allegedly sleeping with her is so fucked up. Like, you're supposed to help this human, and instead you're fucking them. Like, it's mind-blowing. And if you're willing to do that... And then
eventually fucking them over.
Yeah, and if you're willing to do that, the slippery slope is in full effect. Like, there is apparently no limit to which this man will go.
Oh, yeah, and he's not the only one.
Right.
Contender number 2, Peter Lawford. Conspiracy theorists who have always suspected foul play. There is an intriguing note to the effect that Marilyn Monroe might have distrusted and even feared JFK's brother-in-law, Peter Lawford, who was the last person to speak to her on the phone, apparently. So some say it was, Greenson. Others say that it was DiMaggio Jr. And then there's statements that, no, it was actually... Lawford, who was the one who was the last one on the phone. So in the handsome green engraved Italian diary that she supposedly kept, probably dating to around 1956, she had appended this fearful note to a short list of people she loved and trusted. The feeling of violence I have lately been feeling afraid for Peter. He might harm me, poison me, etc. Why strange looks in his eyes, strange behavior. In fact, now I think I know why he's been here so long, because I need to be frightened. So she was already fearing him in the very beginning. And there was also a report that Peter Lawford was the one who ordered the body to be placed back in her bed. So incriminating evidence of there being foul play would be removed, and for the enema to dissolve into her system. So some claim that she had taken the pills, she fell asleep, she had, Peter Lawford had informed Eunice to go in there with the enema, instructed by Dr. Greenson on how to administer it while Marilyn was knocked out cold.
And that would explain why there's no trace of the drugs in her stomach.
Exactly.
Because... again, wild speculation, but the level of drugs in her system is so high, you wouldn't be able to ingest it orally, and it doesn't show up in her digestive tract.
Right.
So it either had to be injected or it had to be absorbed another way. there's only so many ways our body absorbs nutrients. Like, that just is the way it is.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then another one, we have the Kennedy brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Her association with the Kennedy family possibly got her killed, as we discussed in the first part. Monroe's alleged relationship with Kennedy factors in almost all conspiracy theories about her death. She was famously rumored to be sleeping with President JFK, a rumor she helped stroke with the notorious sultry version of Happy Birthday, Mr. President, that she sang to JFK mere months before her death. But later, rumors claimed she was also having an affair with the younger brother, of course, Attorney General Robert Kennedy. Now, she was then possibly killed by Robert Kennedy to cover up their affair. That's another one that's been thrown into the bunch. So first advanced by right-wing crackpot Frank A. Capelli in a 1964 pamphlet, the theory states that Monroe was indeed sleeping with Robert Kennedy, but got too attached, and he had her murdered to protect his career. Capelli also accused the Kennedys and several other people who knew Monroe of being communist spies. So there you kind of have it. And that leads us to her being killed possibly by the CIA to hurt the Kennedys. In a book, Victim, The Secret Tapes of Marilyn Monroe, Matthew Smith claims that the CIA knew Marilyn Monroe and Robert Kennedy were having an affair and killed her to get back at the Kennedy family for their disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion. Yes. So that's another possibility right there, because that was an intense, disastrous
And this goes
invasion.
back to what I said, is now you're playing with the big dogs.
There you go.
You know, and it's that thing of like, okay, well, could she go toe-to-toe with John F. Kennedy? Maybe. Could she go toe-to-toe with both brothers and their brother-in-law? Yeah, probably. She's a big name. She's got her own clout. She's a known entity. People are going to wonder where she is.
Yeah.
Can you go toe-to-toe with a presidential administration, the head of our legal branch, and also the CIA, and now the mob is involved, and now the FBI is involved? Like, all of a sudden, it becomes very crowded in that bungalow.
Oh, for sure. That's a very crowded bungalow with a lot of shade and tea right there.
A lot of really heavy hitters. I mean, J. Edgar hated the Kennedys. And so it's like, again, who knows? This is wild speculation, but there are big chess pieces at play here.
Oh, yeah. No checkmate right there.
No.
So, and then we have the Mafia.
Yes,
this was another one.
Huge one.
Huge ones. She was killed by the Mafia to hurt the Kennedys. So, like you said, it's like being involved with the Kennedys. She wanted to hurt them, but then again, other people wanted to hurt the Kennedys as well.
Yes.
The book Double Cross claims that Monroe was actually murdered on the orders of Chicago Mafia boss Sam Gasciano. According to the authors Chuck and Sam Gasciano, Sam's brother and godson, she was killed to send a message to Robert Kennedy to back off his crusade against the mob. A similar theory was advanced by private detective Milo Spiraglio, who claimed Jimmy Hoffa was also involved. No Kennedys this time. Donald Spotto claimed in his 1993 book Marilyn Monroe, the biography, that her death was an accidental overdose, which happened because Marilyn Monroe lied to her two doctors about the amount of medication she'd been prescribed. Afraid of the possible consequences, said Spotto, the doctor staged Monroe's death as a suicide with the help of her housekeeper. Once again, Eunice is brought into the light.
Eunice.
God damn it.
The thing, yeah. So, brief history of the Kennedys, they have deep mob connections.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's highly likely that John F. Kennedy won Illinois because of their father's connection through like the bootlegging Prohibition era to the Mafia. So then when Bobby Kennedy turns around and literally goes on such a highly publicized crusade against the Mafia, they're like, whoa, motherfuckers, like, we got you to where you are. You don't get to bite the hand that feeds you.
Exactly.
And one of the things I was watching is this really intense footage of the indictment between Bobby Kennedy and oh shoot, you just said his name. What's the Mafia guy's name?
Sam.
The other one.
Jimmy Hoffa.
Thank you, Hoffa. Could not think of it. It's this crackpot reporting that they come here for. But there's this moment in the deposition, and they're both saying the same sentence, and it's that weird thing of like, no, you know what I'm not saying. And then like Bobby Kennedy's like, no, you, like, we both know. And he keeps saying like, you need to say. And Jimmy Hoffa's like, you know what I'm saying, I don't need to say anymore. In his deposition. And a lot of people theorize that is in reference to the sort of warning murder of Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah. It's just a web of suspects and theories, for sure. It's just everyone's a big player here.
Yes.
And she has gotten involved with a lot of these players. I mean, I know she's involved with even the Mafia, too. They knew her.
Oh, of course.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Now, there's another theory, too, that's a little far-fetched.
Yes.
The government over aliens.
Yes.
This was brought up. She was going to expose the truth behind UFOs. So the latest one to emerge, courtesy of Gizmodo.com, it's probably the strangest and least probable. Dr. Stephen Greer, who is the subject of the documentary, unacknowledged, claimed that Marilyn Monroe was killed by the government because she was threatening to leak classified information about extraterrestrials. Cool story.
I mean, oh, goodness.
And no words. Sips the coffee, no words.
There's just... Oh, goodness. I don't know. There's so much swirling around this theory that's like, I understand where it's coming from. I was watching I believe it's the Jimmy Kimmel interviews with Bill Clinton and Barack Obama regarding whether or not there are aliens.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's saying, like, as soon as I was sworn in, I would, like, run and, like, try and figure out what happened. And everybody, like, hyper analyzes the both presidents' faces.
Yeah.
And says, like, they're hiding this secret and they're both, like, making it light of it, but it's, like, actually very serious. And then, like, that's what Marilyn Monroe was killed of, because, like, she knew and she was going to expose it, and JFK couldn't be exposed or, like, be caught up with like pillow talk and sharing secrets. Like, that all seems like a lot.
It does. It's a lot. But there are a lot of motives surrounding her. A lot of people really do believe that it had to do with the Mafia and it had to do with Bobby Kennedy, because there was another report that came out with investigative author Darwin Porter, who knew the Star, claims that 5 Mafia hoodlums working under orders from mob boss Sam Gasciano carried out the hit. But he also believes that Bobby, who secretly visited Marilyn with his British brother-in-law, Peter Lawford, hours before she died. So there was another claim that Bobby was there at her house before she died, and that had a lot to do with the death. Of course, Bobby didn't do it, according to Porter, who tells the Mirror in an exclusive interview he was a very smart man. He wouldn't have done it. Sam Gasciano had the motive to kill her. She was threatening to blow the lid off of his operation. So there's another, conspiracy theory that she was going to blow the lid on the Kennedys. No, she was going to blow the lid on the Mafia boss, Sam Gasciano. But it also begs the question, did someone pay him to murder Marilyn? And if someone did pay him, the only person that I can think of is Kennedy. So some believe Kennedy didn't order it. CIA boss James Angleton did. They were bugging her phone because of her pillow talk with the president, telling her secrets he shouldn't have, and both brothers dropping her. So she was going to hold a press conference. Like I said before, 2 days later, she's found dead. So she was planning a big press conference to throw everyone under the bus. Obviously, murder that was well understood by many at the time, only the reasons for it were not known until now. You could check the clips with Dr. Stephen Greer on Marilyn, the Truth. That will probably surprise you quite a bit. But the following year, JFK very likely had to go because he was, later killed that year.
Yes.
Hell, JFK is another one that couldn't quite control himself either. He was hard to handle publicly, and obviously to send a clear message. Not even the president is safe. So better watch out. Our Strange Guys podcast brought up a shocking fact about JFK. I was talking to them too the other day about it. They mentioned that JFK was addicted to meth to treat chronic pain he sustained during World War II and wanted us to pull out of Vietnam. So they also had an episode on their podcast with John Tini of Weird Lectures and Ghost Stalkers. So John explains how he started assisting someone who did lectures on JFK. And it turns out that the night before JFK was assassinated, he ran up and down the halls of a hotel naked. Secret Service had to apprehend him.
Whoa.
So a lot of people had to go. Marilyn Monroe had to go. John F. Kennedy had to go. There was just so much shit hitting the fan at this point.
And then eventually Bobby Kennedy. He's the last of them, but, a decade later, not even a full decade, but you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
It just is that thing. And, later the housekeeper alleges that Bobby Kennedy was there in California, and he has, a pretty... He has an alibi and says he wasn't there, but there's other people who allege that he was. Right. So again, who's covering up for whom?
He had an alibi. Now, who did he have to pay for that alibi? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In your final thoughts of all of this, what do you think happened?
What do I think happened?
The morning of August 5th.
I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent.
Go.
Did you ever read Sharp Objects, which is by the same author who did Gone Girl and
no,
it's a movie with Charlize Theron and it's very good, so shameless book plug.
Oh wait, no, I've seen that movie where she survives
her family is all murdered and she's the only survivor, the only one, and now she's an adult.
She's an adult and she's trying to figure out the mystery, and then she, and I don't want to give away the ending, but I know what happens.
Yeah. And so the reason I even bring that up, no spoilers, is that the whole time you are sort of trying to figure out who did it. And the actual events that happen on that night are a lot of little pieces that add up to one big piece. So it's not that there's a black and white answer and this one thing happens. It's that a bunch of things converge in this almost perfect storm. And the reason I even bring that up is not just to spoil books for people, although I do love doing that, is I think that is a very similar real life situation with what happened with Marilyn Monroe. Especially like you're saying, when you start looking at it from the viewpoint of a piece on a chessboard that has to be eliminated, removing Marilyn Monroe solves a lot of people's problems.
Yes.
And so I think the truth is probably a little bit of all of these theories, maybe not the alien one, but that they all probably have some roots in the truth, and that the actuality of what happened is in the center of that Venn diagram. So all of that to say, that's a very long-winded way of saying what I think happened is that the Kennedys... Man, this is such a convoluted web. I can't
know,
even organize it.
I know, it's just trying to organize all the sequences.
What I think happened is that the Kennedys and the mob were incredibly at odds, and that the deal with the Mafia was we'll get you into office and you can run on this sort of Camelot knight in shining armor platform, but do not come for us. And so when they are in power, I think they thought, well, now that we're here, we can do whatever we want. That very young machismo.
Yeah.
And we're going to go after the Mafia. Bobby, especially, as the Attorney General, really goes after them. And I think in an effort to silence them, the Kennedys, the Mafia sees Marilyn as a way to control them. And I think, unfortunately, when JFK most likely told her things, possibly Bobby, but I think JFK probably is more likely that he told her things that she should not have known. So that's a burden that he placed on her.
Yeah. That
then she tried to possibly weaponize, like you were saying with this press conference, and that once that, again, she's in especially you're talking about the hotel that's owned by Frank Sinatra, another person with incredible mob ties.
The Cal Neva.
that was probably known that she was thinking about doing that. And
yeah.
From that point of view, she now is someone that they could use to control the Kennedys. In order to do that, they have to be able to control Marilyn. This is where I think the doctor comes into play. So again, it's all these tangled webs.
I 100% agree.
So I think the mob got in contact with her psychotherapist, and whether he agreed because he wanted the money, like you were saying, whether they were threatening him, whatever it ended up being, I think that he was the executioner's axe for the mob under duress in order to control the Kennedys. And that Bobby Kennedy was in LA to try and convince her not to do the press conference, but I don't think that he specifically was involved with her killing. I think that the housekeeper and the doctor were the instruments of death. The Mafia was the engine behind that, and the Kennedys were the target.
Right there.
Yeah.
I was just, segueing into what I believe happened. That right there. Because their stories don't add up.
No.
Their whole mannerism after, like, her death just doesn't add up.
Yeah, and there's taped, or, the housekeeper, they're asking her, well, why did you wait so long? And she literally cannot answer. Just stuttering and hem-hawing and backtracking for minutes on end. And finally it comes out like, well, I had to call her publicist to see what I should do. That's such a simple answer. If that were the truth, you would have had that. And maybe you would have been weird about saying that because it is a mistake, but it's a lie. I don't trust her. So that's my opinion. I think it's a lot of, members at play. And unfortunately, when you remove Marilyn, things get a lot easier for a lot of people.
I agree.
Yeah.
As sad as that sound,
Lady of Sorrow.
I agree.
Yeah.
In the long run, she was taken advantage of.
Yeah, again.
And that whole incident at the Cal Neva Hotel and Casino with those two mobsters that raped her, I think that was a warning. That was a warning, like, back off. But then I think it was already too late,
Well, and
she was already in this nasty game.
Yes, and, it's that thing where the director of The Misfits said it got to a point where we all knew she was doomed. And I think that is this case where at a certain point, she's so far down the rabbit hole.
Yes.
It just can't be helped or stopped, unfortunately.
Yes. Right there. That's our thoughts on her death.
Yeah.
Her death, her murder.
I think it was a murder.
It wasn't like we call it murder suey.
Murder suey.
I mean, a lot of people like to call it probable suicide because, she had a lot of issues. There was also claim that she requested a refill on her Nebutol the night before, and she had attempted suicide once before. But, she didn't leave anything set up. Like, she didn't set up anything. Okay, well, I want so and so to do this and get this. It wasn't there was no setup of her estate. So that's another thing that we can segue into. What happened to her estate? What happened after her death? In her will, she had a will. Marilyn Monroe left several thousands of dollars to her half sister Bernice Baker. I know, because she ends up meeting her, before her death, of course, and they always kept in touch. And her secretary, May Reyes, a share for the education of her friend Norman Roston's daughter, and established a $100,000 trust fund to cover the costs of the care of her mother and the widow of her acting teacher, Michael Chekhov. Now, from the remaining estate, she granted 25% to her former psychiatrist, this bitch, Marianne Chris, for the furtherance of the work as such psychiatric institutions or groups as she shall elect, and 75%, including her personal effects, film royalties, and real estate, to Lee Strasberg, whom she instructed to distribute her effects among my friends, colleagues, and those whom I am devoted to. According to her words, due to legal complications, the beneficiaries were not paid out until 1971.
Wow.
Crazy. funny how Dr. Greenson is not in this little. Well, it's kind of funny. I know. She even knew. I think deep down inside, she's like, I don't think this guy is bueno.
Right.
So there you have it, guys. We just gave you pretty much cliff notes of the theories and suspects of, possible motives leading up to her death and after her death as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's just that incredibly sad thing of like, would we even be having this conversation? Obviously not because we're a paranormal podcast, but, she died so young in such complicated circumstances at the height of her career, and is then frozen in time as this like sex symbol movie star of the golden era. And so, had she not been involved in these things, had she not been killed, all of that, had she lived a full life, I don't think she would have the same impact or the same like status that she does. Being she is an icon, sadly, because she was killed.
Yes.
I think. And it's so sad, but it's like this weird, like she's memorialized and immortalized because of her death. What a horrible way.
So she's a martyr.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
Ugh.
She like led a true Hollywood story.
Yeah.
Right there.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. A true Lady of Sorrow, as we said before. So now, guys, we can talk about ghosts. We go into the paranormal aftermath of Marilyn Monroe. So according to Brian Clune of Hollywood Obscura, there are several places where Marilyn Monroe haunts. The main one is the infamous Roosevelt Hotel. She's mainly felt and seen in room number 1200. Patrons of the room have stated that they would hear what sounds like a woman's voice speaking and even singing. One guest has encountered and reported seeing what looks like a woman sitting at the foot of his bed, looking at him, smiling. The woman, who is very gorgeous and blonde, resembles Marilyn Monroe, donned in her red lipstick. Yes, so other people have stated that they felt cold spots in that room. They have the sense of being watched, along with seeing what looks like a pink mist or light orbs that kind of circulate around the room. They also have stated of seeing a face of a woman floating. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Another area within the hotel it's actually a piece of furniture of the hotel. It's the full-length mirror that was once in her suite, in suite number 1200, where Marilyn stayed in. So in 1985, just before the hotel was to reopen after a long renovation, one of the employees who was busy cleaning the mirror, which at the time was in the general manager's office, she said that she saw the reflection of a blonde girl looking at her. When she turned around and asked the woman if she needed help, there was nobody there. And when she turned back to look at the mirror to continue dusting and cleaning it, she could see the reflection of the woman again, who was still staring at her. Now, even though the employee never said the woman was Marilyn Monroe, most people believe that that is her in the mirror, because Marilyn Monroe would always gaze at herself daily, and she may have imprinted part of her spirit within the glass. So the mirror has been moved a number of times around the location of the hotel. People have claimed that, when it was in the lobby, that they still see Marilyn's reflection in the glass. But unfortunately, from what I found out through a friend of mine, the mirror is now kept in a storage area in the hotel, which kind of sucks. So
that's pretty recent, though, right?
Yeah, it is fairly recent.
I was like, because I was at the Roosevelt once, and for anyone who hasn't been before, there are a couple different levels, if you will, of accessibility. So if you're just walking in off the street,
yes,
you can kind of go into this little area of the lobby. And if you're there and dressed well enough, you can go into a little bit further to the bar and the restaurant. And then if you're there for the actual event that may or may not be happening and like have proof, then you're in like the VIP areas, like the ballroom and all of that. Or if you're staying there, obviously you can go to the final level, which is like the guest rooms.
It's so fucking expensive to stay there
It's
at night.
Incredibly expensive.
It's like starting rate is $300. I don't know how people stay there.
I think they're staying for like the experience of it.
Yeah.
So I've only ever been to like level 2, let's say. Like I went and like the bar is beautiful. It's really nice.
It is. I've been to the bar, had sweet potato fries at the bar.
God,
it's
so
amazing.
good. But when I was there, this was several years ago when I first moved to Hollywood, and the mirror was still there, and I wouldn't look at it. I was like, no, I'm good. I'm just going to be over here. Like, no.
I'll gloat about you from afar.
Yeah, it was. So that, that was still like at least 6 years ago now, 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. So I didn't realize they had moved it. That's kind of a bummer.
They moved it to a storage area because a friend of mine went to go, because I told her about the story and she inquired about it when she went there a couple of weeks ago, and they told her that they moved it to a storage area.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And you know what? I don't know if there's a coincidence with this. I don't know if it maybe was her energy that probably organized this or rearranged the stars. But Marilyn Monroe, from what I read, was an avid yoga.
Oh, really?
She was an avid yogi.
Whoa.
She liked to do yoga. There's pictures of her doing yoga on the beach. And when I was a member of Core Power Yoga, we would always do yoga mimosas at the Hotel Roosevelt, which is like down the street, so Hollywood. But the area where we would do our sessions was on a breezeway that led to her room.
No.
Because when I saw room 1200 and then I saw pictures of the room.
You're like, I've been here.
And then I saw how to get to the room. I'm like, that's the same breezeway where we would do our yoga classes. I just felt that was kind of a coincidence.
That's so specific and creepy.
Yeah, but I always felt like good juju around there.
Sure.
I always did. Even like when we were in our savasana poses and, deep in our meditation, I always felt, positive around there.
Well, it would make sense. Like, I feel like so many of the things we talk about, because one of the things with haunting is that it gets a little murky if it's not the place they died. It's like, well, what's actually happening there? Because, like, otherwise, if the ghost has unfinished business, that would most likely be where they expired. I think one of the answers to that is that energy imprints onto things. So, like, the mirror, like you were saying, with her constantly being concerned with her appearance and all of that, that would imprint on the mirror. If she's doing, like, yoga and practicing mindfulness and like all of those things, that's going to imprint a positive energy. So of course, like, you would then pick that up while you're on a similar wavelength. Like, that all makes sense to me.
It all kind of like ties in together.
Good for you, Marilyn. Get that yoga, girl.
Get that yoga, even in her afterlife. I always wonder, maybe in spirit she was doing yoga with us.
Nice.
Okay.
Namaste.
Now, here's another story. During her life, while Marilyn was embroiled in scandal, hooking up with the president and, of course, his brother, Bobby, Marilyn was known to frequent the Cal Neva Hotel and Casino, as we mentioned before, on the border between California and Nevada. She would, have her own cabin, which was cabin number 3. She was often there a lot to, pretty much get away from the city life. But she had her own bungalow. At the time, the resort closed its doors. There were still the tunnels that led directly into Sinatra's and Monroe's closets. Supposedly, these were left over from Prohibition. And there were still tours that were being given throughout this hotel because it is, a landmark. This was like the place of the 1960s to venture to because the Rat Pack, Marilyn Monroe, even the Kennedys would venture there. So there are these tours that are given throughout the hotel, and you can take them through the tunnels that lead directly to the room where Bobby Kennedy and his brother would always stay. The cabin where Marilyn Monroe stayed, people who would stay in this cabin had reported, this is like before the closure, had reported smelling what smelled like a perfume scent. And they believe that it may be Marilyn Monroe. They would also sense being watched. And at one point, someone even stated that they had seen Marilyn sitting in the chair at the mirror during a tour.
Whoa.
So the tour group will go through the tunnels, and they would always stop at a certain light hanging in the corridor near where the stairs leading to Monroe's secret closet entry was located.
I would not be going into a tunnel tour.
All right, guys, let's go to this dark, scary tunnel. No! So they would take the tours through this tunnel, and they would stop at a certain light. Bryce, I'm sorry.
I know.
I'm trying to compose myself. I swear, there's times when we're recording this, I need to put like my phone on recording because your facial expression.
You could not get me to go into a tunnel tour. It's ridiculous.
Bryce
Absolutely not.
In your Skechers, like grabbing your stuff.
Yeah,
Bryce
no.
going,
I'll wait outside. Like, no.
No me gusta.
No. Of course there's a light hanging in the corner.
With your Starbucks and your Skechers shuffling away.
Absolutely not. Okay,
I'd be waiting out here in the natural light.
I'm sorry. It's just ridiculous. We're going to go on a tunnel tour. Bye. Absolutely not.
Did not buy tickets for this. All right. So they stop at a certain light hanging in the corridor near where the stairs leading to Monroe's secret closet entry was located, and how this was known to be Marilyn's light. Now, this is where it kind of gets crazy. So the tour guide explains that it was a light that was permanently lit, no switch to turn it off. There are at times where the light will, stay on for days. It would stay on for days. No one knew how to turn the light off. Mm-hmm. There was no switch for it. There was just no way to shut it off when they needed to shut off. So one day, a maintenance man comes in to replace, the bulbs and some of the lighting in the corridors. And he was checking out Marilyn's light. And he checked, the wiring. He replaced the bulbs. He said that there were times when he would, be in that tunnel and he would be in pitch darkness and he would ask, Marilyn to turn on the light for him.
No.
Marilyn would turn on the light. The light would turn on. He would also feel this sense of, being watched, that someone was behind him when he would walk down the corridor. He would hear what sounds like footsteps following him.
Oh, my God.
It could be Marilyn, or it could be maybe the old gangsters from the Prohibition era. You never know. Still moving, alcohol to and from,
Oh, my God. Don't go into the tunnels. Just don't ever go in the tunnel.
Don't go into the woods. Don't go into the tunnels.
Basically, only go into a Starbucks. That's the only safe place.
But a lot of people claim that if you go on this tour, if you tour the tunnels and you stop at the Marilyn Monroe light, if the light's out, if the light is off, and if you ask her nicely, you say, Marilyn Monroe, may you please light this light for us, the light will spring on.
No. Oh, my God. That's no.
I would be down there, Marilyn, give me 2 blinks if the Kennedys were behind your murder. All right. Was it the Mafia? Give me 2 blinks.
Yeah.
2 blinks for yes, or 1 blink for no. Do it.
That's so insane. Oh my God.
Your face,
I just
can't. Like, you're getting anxiety.
The thought of being underground
PTSD?
in the pitch black really doesn't sound that appealing to me anyway. But also and also me and these Prohibition era ghosts. No. Absolutely not.
That would scare me a little bit, like gangster ghosts.
No.
So another place where Marilyn Monroe is mostly seen is her home in Brentwood, California. She always took pride of the fact that she owned property, and it made her feel like a grown-up. Marilyn's spirit has reportedly been seen outside in the alley that serves as a street leading to her home. So there is a theory that Marilyn was alive when she was removed from the house and died being placed on the ambulance to be taken to the hospital. That was just one of the theories that lingered around there. So people have claimed that they see a spirit. If you remember in episode 8 of The Casting Curse, I was posting pictures of what looks like Marilyn's ghost sitting on the poolside and sitting or standing on the edge of the garage door. It was like this gateway garage entrance to lead into the house. And there's this picture of what looks like a woman standing on the edge of that door. It's really creepy. But it's on our Instagram if you dig a little deep right there. So there's also been claims that people have heard what sounds like a woman singing and talking in and around the hallways of the house. There's also a picture of what looks like the ghost of Marilyn Monroe sitting by the pool. Another report has stated that a neighbor saw what looked like a young woman walking past the windows one day. And she thought, oh, the neighbors had finally come home from being out of town. She goes and knocks on the door. No one answers. The next day, she finally sees the neighbors coming in with their suitcases. And she's like, oh, I thought that you probably got home yesterday. Why do you think that? I saw someone walking past the window who looked like a young woman. Did you guys have a house sitter? No. Yeah. One occurrence where a resident was fast asleep in the Marilyn Monroe room where she had passed. She was asleep in bed around 2:30 in the morning. She felt what seemed like someone was getting in bed with her. Like someone was crawling into bed with her. She turned around and no one was there. So that was another claim. Yeah. So that's, another place where people have seen her. Mm-hmm. Now, another interesting side note. This doesn't have to do with Marilyn, but this is what I found out through Hollywood Obscura. Robert Kennedy, the man most likely to have ordered her kill, if indeed she was murdered, was shot and killed a short distance away from Hollywood at the Ambassador Hotel on June 5th, 1968, just after winning the California Democratic primary. He was gunned down and hit several times by Shahan, and Kennedy died the following day, and the hotel has since been closed and then demolished to make way for a high school. However, before it was shut down, there were many reports of Bobby's spirit being seen in the kitchen passageway. Now, once the school itself was built, it was designed to look just like the old Ambassador Hotel. Perfect.
Sure, what could go wrong with that?
Students will report to their teachers and staff that they were seeing a man who wasn't there. He would appear and then disappear. And once they had given a description of the man, it closely resembles Bobby Kennedy.
No.
Still, there have been no reports of ghostly activity persisting, either because the spirit has left or no one is allowed to talk about it.
Oh my God, that's so crazy.
So that is the paranormal aftermath of Marilyn Monroe, and just a little tidbit of Bobby Kennedy right there.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing too, is living in Hollywood, she really is alive in this city. Like, she is everywhere.
All over Hollywood Boulevard, for sure.
Yeah, whether it's the impersonators or the wax figure, the murals of her, the memorabilia of her, the paranormal, all of it. It's just, there is a presence of Marilyn. She is this city, and it's so palpable.
Yes.
And so for all of that to be happening, it's just like, well, either the city has manifested itself in her or vice versa, but that she really is almost everywhere you look. Mm-hmm.
She is still alive in some ways.
Yeah.
I give her that. Like, she is still alive. She lives, in a lot of the murals around the city.
Yeah.
And a lot of the, impersonators on Hollywood Boulevard that hound you for that dollar tip after you take a picture with them. Mm-hmm. And, just everywhere. Even down the street. She went to high school at Van Nuys High School. Yeah. Just like down the street from where we are.
Yeah.
It's insane. And her legacy still lives on. Her name is still, it still makes money.
Oh, yeah.
Like, her name generates a lot of money to this very day.
It is synonymous with like that era of glamorous Hollywood, and then all of the seedy underpinnings of that time. Mm-hmm. She's the big fish. Yeah,
it's just really sad that she led a short life, but she went through so much in that short life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that it was marked by sort of, not to get like hyper political, but her life really was marked by like men using her for their own advantage. I mentioned it in part 1. There would be no Hugh Hefner without Marilyn Monroe.
No, there wouldn't have.
And she was not compensated for that. She was not acknowledged for that. He literally just used her image without her permission, without compensating her, to make his empire. Mm-hmm. And that was pretty much par for the course for her life. And it's just so sad. And I think, we're getting better about that.
Yeah.
But we still have a long way to go.
We still do. I agree.
And I think that's part of why so many people relate to her, and like why so many young actresses at the school, you know, so many of them, she is their like saint, patron saint almost. And it's because they relate to the struggle that she, and, you know, the heights of fame that she achieved. That is the goal. So she lives on in our hearts, but
she does.
It's a sad one.
And in Elton John's songs.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Should we take it to a kind of long close?
Yeah.
I know. So, guys, this is our last episode for our first season. As you heard before in our past episodes, we're going to be taking a bit of a short hiatus. Don't worry. Just a little one. Just half of April and all through May. We'll come back in early June, but we are hitting a pretty heavy load at our jobs right now. As Bryce has mentioned before, he's afraid of emails. I'm about to be in that position as well. It's going to get very busy for us at our work. And not to mention, I want to just gloat about it for a bit, but I am going to be flown to Portland because this film that I worked on, that was a short film in 2014, got greenlit to be a feature. So it's going to get me into the big girls union of costuming. And I just found out that our lead actor, I can't give away anything, but he is the godfather of all character actors. All I can say is that he was in Pet Sematary, The Green Mile, and Shawshank Redemption.
It's me.
It's... Oh, yes.
Surprise. That's awesome.
And he's a mountain of a man, so I'm going to have to figure out how to dress him. But I will be in a place in Portland where The Goonies and Short Circuit was filmed.
Hey, you guys.
That's I'm kind of fangirling.
So amazing.
I am not going to have a life for the next 2 months.
Worth it.
And I will take my own personal hiatus, you know, for another year, because I am just kind of done right now. Except for this podcast. I still want to work on this podcast. Of course. And I also want to say, like, a big thank you to our listeners.
It's been awesome.
I am just speechless right now. I'm literally speechless. I want to give a big thank you to 2 people in particular. In the very beginning, when we uploaded our first episode and made it public, I want to give a big shout out to Dark Divide, because you noticed us in the very beginning. You gave us a really cool shout out on Twitter, and I keep you guys in our heart, Dark Divide. And I know that you're doing bigger and better things with your other podcast, Big Conversations, which I highly recommend that you all listen to, because I mean, it's a great break from all, you know, what we've been talking about as well.
This super light subject.
And then, of course, to Jerry Pauly of Hillbilly Horror Stories.
They are the best.
For being our Yoda, just for being, you know, our special ear for us to, like, you know, talk to if we have any questions or needed a little advice. We want to say thank you to you, Jerry, and, you know, we love you, man.
Yeah, they're great.
They're amazing. And to all of you guys who follow us on Twitter and Instagram, we see you and we adore you. Please follow us and stalk us on Instagram and on our Facebook page. You can find us at Hollyweird Paranormal and on Twitter at HWP Podcast. If you want to say hi, you want to submit stories of your own, please do, because we love to do these listener episodes of paranormal experiences. Please.
So cool.
It's so funny to see Bryce read them and like freak out. Jonathan, you're one.
I know. He really did it. I honestly, every day since then, have thought about that story.
Like, Trail of Tears.
Oh, no. Why would they do that?
There's another Trail of Tears from here to your house.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
So we definitely would love to keep in touch with you guys through our Gmail. So you can find us at hollyweird@gmail.com. Message us, even if it's just to say hi or what's up. You can find us on Instagram and do that. Just slip into our DMs. And of course, we can't forget our spiritual bays of the week. I want to give a big shout out to these guys, Invasions of the Remake. It's a weekly podcast with hosts Jason, Trish, and Sam exploring the cinematic remakes of old 80s, 70s, and 90s films.
Love it.
They discuss films that have been remade for better or for worse, and they also do a good job giving their own personal critiques to these horror and retro gems. And another one is Cold Case Murder Mysteries. I see you on Instagram and Twitter. Hi. It's a weekly true crime podcast with host Ryan Caros. I think I pronounced that correctly. If I didn't, I am so sorry, bro. Who explores high-profile cases through mind-bending psychology. So those two, Invasions of the Remake and Cold Case Murder Mysteries, are our spiritual bays of the week. We would definitely want to give our last shout-outs to before we come back in June.
Yes.
You have anything to say, Bryce?
I think just stay weird. It's always a good one.
Always a good one. And if you want to re-listen and relive our stories, our episodes from our first season, you can do so on Apple Podcasts,
Yes.
on Stitcher, on Google Play, on Blueberry, on what else? Podbay, Podknife. There's so many ways to listen to us. If you
We are everywhere.
We are everywhere. But trust me, we're going to come back stronger in our second season. We got some juicier stories. That's a pun. Juicier stories. We're going to be squeezing the juice on one special episode of a true crime and paranormal aftermath of someone that likes, to run.
Yes.
This was a recommendation from one of our listeners on Instagram. Girl, we hear you. Don't worry, it's coming up. I didn't forget.
Yes.
So yeah, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Hollywood Paranormal.
You guys are the best.
You guys are the bestest. We adore the hell out of you guys. Mucho.
Yes.
All right, Bryce, ready to take this to a close?
I'm ready.
I'm going to be sad, but we'll be back.
We'll be back.
We'll be back. All right.
You can just re-listen over and over.
Right.
And then it'll be like you never missed us.
Right. We'll miss you guys for sure.
Yes.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Stay weird. We'll be back. Bye.